Calls our meeting to order at 6:17, and we'll be adjourned after the president's and roll call in the executive session. We adjourn to the executive session. We're going to go now. We're on to a very important meeting. The next item on this one is the approval of the agenda. We have a motion to modify the agenda as presented to personnel. I'm sorry, I did not look at it.
Mr. Johnson, you may want to discuss the general nature of the three pieces of personnel agenda.
Okay, can you hear me? Aha, now I can hear my own echo. Okay, the three items that we just made a motion to add to our agenda for tonight are for coaches for the various sports at the low level of risk, the moderate level of risk, and swimming, because swimming was handled separately, and there's been different changes going on with that. So we will be discussing them further throughout the meeting and voting on them later. At this point, do we have any additional discussion before we move ahead on the agenda? Okay, all in favor of the modified agenda? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Abstained? Okay. So we have 5, 1, and 1 on that one. And the next item up on our agenda is communications. I'm going to start off with a quick thing here as I go. Over in the past few weeks, our board has received about 20 emails, might be more now, more came in after I wrote this, sent either directly to the board or to Mr. Day, who has shared them with the board. I'm sure each member of our board has also received individual messages and emails, text, or phone calls. The majority of our board meetings on both the 8th and the 15th were spent discussing sports, with our athletic director, Marissa Doria, in attendance both times. After the second meeting, Mr. Day sent out a message to the Sweet Home community, which said that the board was supportive of moving forward with the low-risk sports of golf, girls tennis for singles only, and boys and girls cross country. We never, ever said that we would not approve other sports. We had asked Mr. Day and Ms. Doria to work with other schools and get many of our questions answered. Many of the responses we have heard are asking us to reverse a decision that we haven't even made yet. Our board is first and foremost concerned about the education of students and safety of everyone in our community. The guidance we are given is contradictory to the reopening guidance in many ways. As a district, we have spent hundreds of hours and countless dollars to make sure that we are providing the safest possible environment for our students and staff. Some portions of the guidance would poke holes in the plans we are following and introduce issues beyond our control. That is why we have been so cautious in our deliberations. We fully understand that athletics are a significant part of the school experience. The majority of us had or have children who are student athletes and also were ourselves. Before we move to our next agenda item, please understand school board meetings are defined by law as meetings to be held in public. This is to allow the public to see and hear the deliberation process. We have 2 open sessions where we accept comments but do not engage in questions and answers. Those comments are appreciated and considered in our discussions. I want to thank all the letter writers for their submissions and detailed thoughts. Many of the things mentioned were already part of our discussions, like remote swim meets. I also want to thank each of you for joining us tonight and taking the time to share your thoughts. Any of my board members want to add anything else on communications? Okay, that moves us to the open session then. This is our first open session. As per Board Policy 1512, we hold 2 open sessions at each meeting. The first session is limited to comments on agenda items for tonight's meeting. The board welcomes attendance and participation by district residents, persons having business within the boundaries of the school district, and persons who do business with the Board of Education. Speakers must be at least 16 years of age and will be limited to 3 minutes. Please preface your comments with your name, address, and group affiliation if appropriate. Mr. Day, I believe you have a list of the people who wish to speak tonight.
So individuals responded to a request to attend tonight's meeting, and they also indicated that they wanted to speak. So we will go in order of those requests. We've been given some feedback that people that may have originally wanted to speak have chosen not to. And so we will not call upon those people, but if they do want to speak at the end, there would be an opportunity for that. Mr. Johnson, did you want to talk about the board policy around the time limits on that? The 3 minutes and the 30?
Yeah, we have, our policy is that each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, so we would ask that you keep remarks to that 3-minute time frame. And we also have a cumulative limit of 30 minutes on those remarks. If we reach that 30 minutes and we feel it still need more to make it a productive discussion, we will discuss adding on to that time frame.
So the first person that I would ask to come to the microphone, if you would just come to the microphone and speak, and then on the next person, I'm going to ask if you would kind of just kind of prepare yourself in the aisle and stay socially distanced. Jeremy Zimmer. Mr. Zimmer, are you here? Come on up, Mr. Zimmer. Mr. Campolo, come on up to the microphone right up here, Jeremy.
Jeremy, right here.
You can come around.
Mr. Dale, I'm happy to give reminders to keep things moving along.
Okay, thank you.
Speakers, if you'll hear me, just kind of give you a 1 minute and 30 seconds type of warning, just so you have awareness.
Is it okay to ask about those speakers?
I think so.
Yes.
All right. My name is Jeremy Zimmer. This is my 23rd year as both a teacher and a coach here in Sweet Home. I'm currently the head football coach of our program. When thinking about this meeting tonight and the decisions ahead, I came across a quote that I want to share with you guys. Life is not all about sports, but sports are all about life. The life lessons you learn on the athletic fields are just as important, if not more important, than anything you might learn in the classroom. One of the things I've always loved about Sweet Home is the commitment we have always had to teach the whole child. It's impossible to teach the whole child without providing the full experiences of extracurriculars such as athletics. If you ask graduates about what they remember most about their time at Sweet Home, many of them will think back to the great times they had on the athletic fields and the lifelong friendships that were formed in the locker rooms. I think back to last football season, when there was a moment I was reflecting during one of our pregame dinners. I looked around and I saw parents volunteering their time to serve our guys dinner. The players had brought a speaker into the senior lounge, and they started to sing songs. And before you know it, we had about most of our team up doing karaoke and singing songs. And then we had guys up on top of the tables, the senior lounge, just dancing. And they were dancing on those tables. And I tell you what, it was a fantastic moment. With the combination of the dinner, the music, the laughter, the dancing, you could see the brotherhood that was being formed right in front of us. This is the Sweet Home way. And I respectfully ask this is not taken away from our student athletes. It's already been tough enough when my football guys see high school football being played in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New Jersey, with states bordering right around New York. There have been over 2,000 high school football games played this season already in the United States. There has not been one confirmed COVID case from the participation in any of these games. I strongly believe these sports can all be played if done safely. It is my hope that the coaches, the trainers, Ms. Doria, are allowed a chance to do this safely this fall, as well as for the upcoming seasons of many of our other sports programs. Thank you for your time. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer.
Next, John Campolo, Chris McGowan, if you're in the audience, would you come up and into the on-deck circle appropriately for Mr. Campolo?
Let me get started. Hi, my name is John Campolo. First and foremost, I'm the parent of a high school student. I'm a special education teacher in the district. I coach varsity baseball and varsity football. This is my 17th year in district. I want to first say thank you to our administrators and the Board of Education for the time spent and the diligence with the reopening plan. I'm here today as a parent, a teacher, a coach, to advocate for the approved lower and moderate risk fall sports by Governor Cuomo. While I understand that student safety is number one, as well as education are the top priorities, I feel that we can find a way to safely include the improved sports. Since March, these student athletes have had to deal with isolation, cancellation of sports, and closed gyms. This has had such a negative impact on not only our student athletes, but on everyone. When Governor Cuomo made the announcement on what sports could start and when, I know there was some excitement and some disappointment. But the disappointment had the hope of a spring start date for the high-risk fall sports. If we are the only school in Section 6 to not have doubles tennis, swimming, soccer, and field hockey, it will have even more of an effect on our student athletes here at Sweet Home. While there's no foolproof plan, even with the reopening of schools, there are ways to set up more precautions. Myself as a teacher and a coach would do everything possible to ensure the safety of the student athletes and all others. These kids need this. If you drive by any public park, there are kids playing tennis, soccer, basketball, baseball, football, field hockey. Our students are interacting in the community as well as traveling to other areas to meet up with friends. I think we need to adapt to the situation at hand, follow strict policy on how to stay safe, and participate in the approved sports in a more controlled environment. If there are regulations, we as coaches can change and adapt to do what is safe. I've seen how well this works in the school environment. I've seen firsthand how much disappointment there is when a season is canceled, as a large number of baseball players in the program expressed to me. I've also had many discussions this summer with many other seniors in other sports, and they had similar stories of disappointment. It will be more disappointing to know all Section 6 is playing except for Sweet Home. I know how hard the district worked to get these kids into schools because of the recognized importance of doing so to their mental and socio-emotional health. The same holds true for sports. I'm asking that you allow the already approved sports by Governor Cuomo at Sweet Home and let parents decide if they want to allow them to play. The ultimate decision lies with the parents, and if they feel that their child is not safe, they can choose not to participate. We are not putting these students in a closed system now, so why are we shutting doors when that there are things that they're already doing? I know that safety is the main concern, so what can we do as coaches to have you consider allowing the governor's approved sports? And I thank you for your time. I appreciate you letting me talk tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campolo.
Mr. McGowan and Prisco Hudinan. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, if you're in the audience.
So to hear me a little bit better. My name is Chris McGowan. I'm a parent of a Sweet Home High School soccer player. I live in Glendale in the town of Tonawanda. I'm not going to reiterate what a lot of people have said already because, you know, it's the same old here, but I really hope that these kids do get to play and they get to start as soon as tomorrow. I know there's a lot of concern by the board. I was there at the last meeting that they're worried about, in essence, I'll use the word outside contamination from other schools, but there's a 10-day lead up on practices, and that's contained in the school. They're not scrimmaging other schools, they're not playing. Let them start, at least get conditioned, get them going, still gives you time to make your decision. If you decide then that it's moderate sports like soccer can be played, then they can play, and they're at most a few days behind their peers. If they wait all the way to October 5th or even later, you've effectively negated their whole entire season. By the time they ran through all their practices, the weather that in Buffalo is unpredictable, it really is, it's not a season. It's a compromise at best. I also do have some disagreements with some of the comments that were made during that board session. There was discussions about scholarships and how Premier Soccer, as an example, can help with that. But at the same point, I hearken back to the fact that we have a school lunch program because a vast majority of our families are at the poverty line or below. My son has played Premier level soccer for 5 years, and I can attest to it's a $4,000 to $6,000 commitment, not someone who's at a poverty line can afford. This is their only opportunity. There are plenty of diverse individuals on this team who are juniors and seniors that need that scholarship. They need that play time. My son has been devastated. He also plays baseball. He was able to play in the spring, and now he has the chance of not being able to play soccer in the fall. He's played Premier Soccer and Rec Soccer this summer with no issues. He's in a travel baseball league right now. Again, no issues. I urge you, let them practice, let them play. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan.
Prisco, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Thank you. And then Tom Gerber.
Good afternoon. Thanks for giving me the time. My name is Prisco Hundenan. I coach Sweet Home, JV, soccer coach, and also help out with the varsity. And I'm also coaching director for Kenmore Soccer. I've coached throughout Western New York for the past 14 years. And we all know we've been in a lot of tough time. And it's the people that suffer the most in this tough time are the kids. You know, they're young. It's mentally challenging having the COVID. And now also we have to deprive them for the sport, one thing that may give them joy. I totally understand the safety part, but all summer We have teams all over Western New York, even in Buffalo, Amherst, Orchard Park, Delaware Soccer, Kenmore, Kentown. They all have soccer this July. And coaches, they did it with caution. You have 6 feet apart. You set up a cone. You make sure you have the kids sanitized during practice, after practice. Make sure they stay away from their parents while they're practicing. The only time they go to their parents when they're about to go home. So there's a way that we have done this past summer to make sure the kids are safe, and also not just safe when they're on the soccer field, but also when they're safe when they're home, as the same way that it's be done at the school. So as me, as a coach, I'm not a parent. I have 4 nephews, and they play other sports like football. I just think we should give the opportunity to the kid, because not just it's going to make them stronger, but it's going to make them also learn responsibility, that we're having a tough time, and this is the way for them to be responsible for themselves and also for their teammates, to keep everybody safe. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Udnan.
Tom Gerber, Mr. Gerber. And Marcus and Sarah Watson, if you're here.
Can I put those up? Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Gerber. I live over on East Maplemere Road. I have 3 Sweet Home students, or previous students here at the school as well. You may know Madison, a 2019 grad, Sean, a 2020 grad, and Megan, who's with me today, who really is currently a junior, and she's a student athlete, and she really wants to follow in the same experiences that my other 2 children have had, and they've been tremendous at Sweet Home. So thank you for giving all of us the opportunity to discuss this very important topic regarding the continuation of our athletic program in some capacities. The pandemic has affected our children in so many ways. They've marched to the rules and regulations put forth by our state, local governments, and health officials. It has taken a toll on many of them, as you guys have probably seen, in many different ways, as they attempt to learn from home with suspended activities in what is arguably the prime years of their lives, right? So I hope you can understand why this independent decision to forego approved athletic programs by our state and local officials is really a hard pill to swallow. We are not expecting anyone to go against policies, but to simply allow our program to run with the prescribed guidelines, aligning with our school, the other schools in our district, and all the other districts. Our children need to get back to some sense of normalcy, specifically our high school students. They're suffering with suspended academics, athletics, and other school activities. At least when the opportunity to give them back a few things becomes real, like this one, give it back. I speak for the families and student athletes when I ask you to reconsider, which at the beginning I heard you say it wasn't completely gone, but I was under the impression it was, and give them a portion of their high school years back, because I know you can. I'm not asking you to go against mandates, but do not block the little hope they have to get some back of what they have lost already to date. My son had really a terrible graduation year last year, so let's not keep it going if we don't need to. Our children have had so much taken away over the last 6 months. Give them something back. Give them some hope that all this will end. I mean, it's a struggle. Why stretch out their suffering when so many like programs are moving ahead very successfully? Mr. McGowan said it. There's so many programs that are moving ahead. Madison's in Premier Soccer too. That program is moving along well. They're very successful in keeping everybody safe. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Gerber.
Marcus and Sarah Watson. Kim Braley, if you're here, you'll be next.
Hello, I'm Sarah Watson, and I have a big accent, so if you don't...
Get right up towards the microphone, please.
All right, I'm Sarah Watson, and I have an accent, so just work with me here. I have kids that play soccer, and like we all know, as everybody has said, they've gone through hard time with the COVID thing, and they need the soccer back. This is what brings them joy. Even my son, if I need him to do his homework, I have to bribe him with soccer. If I don't do that, he has nothing. And one of the things is, if these kids are not out there playing soccer or playing whatever sports they do, they are just going to stay home, this whole summer, kids got depressed because they didn't have anything else to look forward to. And now, their soccer that they see that they are going to be playing, it's taken away from them. We are begging you guys to please make the decision tonight to help them get back to have hope. If the kids are not playing soccer, they are going to be home, laying there depressed, they are not doing their schoolworks, and what are we going to get? Kids are going to be getting rounder and rounder, they are not going to be healthy, and with the COVID, if they ever catch that disease, everybody knows, if you have like predispositions like high blood pressure, diabetes, and stuff like that, it hurts you worse. So having them be on the field and work out, it keeps them in shape, and they are not going to be like, hurtful when they get something like this. So please, we are begging you guys to make the decision to put the kids back in the sports that they love and work out and stay healthy. The other thing that I wanted to also mention is depression. I've already mentioned that, but please, please, put our kids back in the sports that they like. You guys, I know some of you have kids, and you know what sports does for kids. And it helps them, if they are working out, even it helps their brain works better when they work out. I work at a hospital, and I know I did everything I could to protect my kids, and I want my kids to be healthy, so I'm not throwing my kids out there to get sick. Their health is number one for all of us, the parents, the coach, the teachers. So we care, and that's why we want them to be on the field. So I thank you for giving us this opportunity, and that's it, Daddy.
Thank you, Mrs. Watson.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Marcus Watson. This is my lovely wife over here, heart and soul of our family. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. The one thing I've been struck by when listening today is I think there's a false divide we're making between academics and sports. And some of the other speakers have alluded to that. I have a PhD now, but I can say from my own biography that if it weren't for sports, I wouldn't have that. In high school, like a lot of kids, and I've spoken to parents, I know it's true with a significant portion of our athletes here that we're talking about, I was disinterested in school. You know, we develop at different rates when we're growing up, and I didn't get academically interested until college. And sports was my lifeline, basically, you know, to the school. You know, it was a reason to come to the building, it was a reason to be in the classes, it just kept me tethered at all, right, to academics. And if it weren't for that, you know, I wouldn't have been able to hold on to that line and eventually turn this into a PhD. You know, the effect that sports had on me psychologically was significant. We talked a lot about depression. Sports is what gave me hope as a kid. You know, it got me juiced and energized and active in life. So, you know, from my point of view, it's not an either-or sort of choice. You know, if we're concerned with academics, then, and as others have said, then we ought to be concerned with sports. So I echo what other people have said, that we are responsible, concerned parents, as you are, I'm sure, and we'll do everything we can possibly do to make sure that our kids come safely, follow the rules, and so forth. So we just beg you to please let them play sports this fall.
Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Kim Brady, are you here tonight? Excuse me. Elisa Watson?
Alisa.
And after that would be Jacob Wilson.
Hi, my name is Elisa Watson. I'm a senior at Sweet Home High School, and I've been playing soccer for like about 8 years, and this was like the year I was looking like most forward to. It was going to be like a chance to get scholarships, that stuff, and so it would just really be disappointing if we weren't allowed to play sports. Soccer means like a lot to me. The other thing is a lot of other schools are getting a chance for their seniors to play and get looked at by colleges, and as far as I know, right now we're not getting the same chance, and it would just really be disappointing for my senior season and a lot of our other players' senior seasons if we weren't allowed to play. Also, like, it has been really hard with like the virus and everything where we haven't been able to come to school. Sports is like one thing we really look forward to. It's where a lot of our friends are. Even with like the split like hybrid classes, like a lot of the times we're not seeing a lot of the people our friends that we have from sports teams, so that would help us all get back together. A lot of my best memories are in sports, and I think it helps us stay fit, and I think it's like almost even as is important as the education itself is sports. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob? And then after Jacob would be Maya Flash.
Hi, my name is Jacob Wilson. I'm a senior at the high school this year. So the main reason why I'm here today is to speak on behalf of all the players for boys and girls soccer. So soccer, to all of us, it's more than just a sport. It's a chance to make bonds of a lifetime. It's a chance to make a totally new family with all of these guys. My guys were so devastated just at the thought that we wouldn't have soccer this year. And I think that it would mean a great deal for us to be able to play this year. And one thing, move a little bit closer.
Jacob, just try to get a little closer to the mic.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So soccer is an outdoor sport, and I know that the main cause for concern is that the close contact that the players would be having while on the field. And the thing is that soccer primarily is a stretched out sport. Each player is only ever in close contact with each other for a couple of seconds. And in that time, they're moving around, and there would be very limited risk for anything to be passed along. So our players, since we care so much about this game, we would be willing to do anything for us to be able to play. And we would follow all of the Section 6 guidelines that have been put out to the T. We would be one of the #1 schools to follow those guidelines. We would be the safest ones. And I know that myself, Jassim Kassim, my fellow captain, and Coach McCaffrey, we would make sure that in practices and in games, our players would be following all the guidelines. We would be social distanced when possible, and we would make sure that we would follow all those things just so that we would be able to play. And one point that I've heard a couple times throughout the night that I can attest to is that players have been playing soccer this whole season, or for this whole summer, I should say. And each one of them have been able to play safely, and there's been no cases from, especially like the Kenmore League. The Kenmore League had 157 games this whole summer, and not one case was reported throughout the whole summer, and they have a season that's much longer than what our season would normally have been. As well as in practices, we would make sure that we would be using our own balls, and then for the problem of like pennies, we would have dark and light shirts that we would bring ourselves. During the games and practices, we would make sure that temperatures were moderated, and that before the game and after the game, temperatures would be taken, and as well as practices, whether that was at the discrepancy of the parents or of the coaches, which would be up to you guys ultimately. And I would just like to thank you guys for the time, and I would just like to let you know that all of us athletes, we deeply respect you guys, and we know that you guys are fighting for our safety, and we very much so respect you guys and for all the decisions that you guys have to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you, Jacob. Maya? And then next would be Scott Bagley.
I don't know how to lower this. I'm short, sorry.
We are, not yet. We got about 8 more minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Maya Flash. I have been swimming up varsity for Sweet Home since I was in 7th grade. I am a 2-time state qualifier and a Section 6 champion. I push myself in the classroom each day, and likewise find balance in the pool each afternoon. I'm sure many of my scholar athletes would say the same. The ability to be a student athlete is essential to our lives and to most swimmers. Exercising our mind and bodies is an important aspect for us to have competition that we don't normally get in any other ways. It teaches us that putting in effort can lead to good results, how to train your body, teamwork skills, and much more. I understand your concerns regarding the health risks, but I'd like for you all to keep in mind that there is a safe solution. Many other schools are having a swim season, and we shouldn't be deprived of that. There are New York State guidelines that we have the ability to meet. Our pool is 8 lanes, which gives us more than enough room to practice and have meets, but most of our meets will be virtual. Swimmers can enter the pool area from a separate door. Temperature checks can be taken. Swimmers can remain in the same groups to reduce contact risks and to allow for contact tracing. And if the lockers would be available, that's great. But if not, swimmers can come and go in their suits. As for meets, like I said, we can do a virtual. You would upload your times so that you can compete. This is the way swim clubs around Western New York have been practicing and will be competing for the past few months and for the future. I am fortunate enough to have the ability to practice in a swim club outside of school. We've been practicing in the water for 2 months now and have had 0 transmissions to date. However, many of my fellow student athletes aren't fortunate enough to join an outside swim club. They would still like the opportunity to practice their sport, but also to engage with their peers and compete. Also, all schools are having a season. It would be unfair for those of us who might want to swim in college to be deprived of that opportunity to be scouted. I would like you to know that I am also here to speak on behalf of the boys swim team and that the protocols can be followed the next season. As members of this society and the Sweet Home community, we must find ways to return to a resemblance of normal life in which we can all be safe and healthy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maya.
Thanks, Maya. Scott Bagley. And then next would be Grace Zilsberger.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My daughter, Sophia, plays varsity field hockey for Sweet Home. She's played varsity field hockey since she was in 8th grade. She wears the Sweet Home jersey proudly. She also plays club field hockey. She played club field hockey all summer long, practiced 3 nights a week with about 60 or 70 other girls, and there were no incidents. She plays at the Epic Center in Clarence. They ran soccer games next to the building all summer. No incidents of problems. Now, she's a junior. She has next year. Something I focus on is the high school experience in sports, and one of those things is senior night. Now, I cannot imagine not having a senior night in your final season as a student athlete. I have thought about her senior night since she started playing, and I am not looking forward to it, but I can't imagine not having it. I can't imagine a family not being recognized for the sacrifices they made for their child to play sports. And the worst part in all that is I can't imagine the athlete not having that experience, knowing that people they competed against for 4 years at almost 70 other schools in this district are having that experience. We've been given a guide. We have been given restrictions. We have been given things we can do. But the state has put forth guidelines to proceed safely. And I think we should take those guidelines and implement them. And I think in the aspect of safety, I understand nothing is foolproof. And as much as I would like to focus on what is, I know you all need to depend and be concerned with what if. And I think this, what if we trust the students? What if we let them try this? I know nothing is guaranteed, but I think we should give them the ability to try. I listened to last week's board meeting, and there were several instances where people said, boy, the students just get it. They cooperated so much, they did a great job. And in this situation, we're taking a 180-degree turn in this. We're not letting them try. And I think we need to. And insofar as safety, I think this, if a student athlete or their family does not feel it's safe, I think that's their decision. Because in this situation, low-risk sports are proceeding. High-risk sports are pushed to the spring. The moderate-risk athletes are being penalized for playing these sports because at this point in time, and while I know no decision has been made, they are not playing. And it's not like it's postponed, it's just canceled. And that's very difficult as a parent to hear, to know how disappointed these things are. And again, the state has given us guidance, the Department of Health, the governor's office, they've all issued guidelines. I urge the board to take these guidelines and implement them and to let the kids play sports. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ed.
Grace Zilsberger. And then next would be Colleen Kaluki.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for all you've done for to protect our students and staff and administration, everything. I just want to get up here. My daughter is a senior this year. She has played field hockey since she was in the 7th grade. It is her passion. She was extremely depressed and upset when she could not play lacrosse in the spring. To see her this upset again, to possibly not be able to play field hockey, is devastating. She and her friends have gotten together over the summer. They've practiced safely. They've been together working out and trying to stay conditioned and getting ready for this season, because she is a senior and she wants to play so badly. We all know what the risks are. I, as a parent, am willing to sign a waiver if need be. If you want to have us sign waivers, that could be an idea. I'm not sure, but I just want to please let them play. These kids need it. They've been depressed and awful. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Zilsberger. Excuse me, at this point, from the board, we've reached our 30-minute time limit. If the board, anybody wants to make a motion to extend it to an additional 30 minutes? Yes, I would like to make a motion. Second? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on extending our discussion for an additional 30 minutes? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that motion carries 7-0. Mr. Day, our next speaker, please.
Colleen Kaluki. Christine Hayter. And then after Mrs. Hayter, Scott Gall.
My name is Christine Hayter, and my children attended Maplemere School, middle school, and high school. I have 5 sons, 2 of which are graduates of Sweet Home High School. They were both 2 sports athletes, and they graduated 4th and 1st, respectively, in their classes. My younger 3 are also 2 sport athletes, and they are very involved in student lighthouse teams as well. Sports has taught them respect, discipline, competitive success, and focus. And I believe to a lot of students, I've heard this tonight from a lot of parents, that the monotonous routine of sports practices helps kids. It helps them with their mental health. It helps them with their physical well-being and their time management skills. And I have often found that with my own children, and I'm sure there are other people as well, my kids did better when they were in their sports seasons than they did when they weren't, because there was less time to fool around for the best part. They went to school, they did their sports, they came to their homework, and they went back to it again. So I would really appreciate if you reconsider and let the Sweet Home athletes compete. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hayter.
Mr. Gall, and then Sophia Vadnais.
Hi, my name is Scott Gall. I live on Dolphin Drive in the town of Tonawanda. My daughter is currently in 10th grade, and my son just graduated in 2019. So both have been student athletes and heavily involved here in the Sweet Home community. I want to first start off by applauding the efforts, the tireless efforts that went into reopening the schools safely this year. I know I helped on the ground level, and I know the just absolute tireless efforts that went into the reopening. And I think we've done a great job when we look at what's gone on in neighboring districts. I think we've kind of hit a home run with how we approached it, our planning, and the results already just by the feedback I've heard from my daughter. So it's been great. However, I do believe that I think we might miss a tremendous opportunity that will allow our children to reconnect with schools, each other, and themselves. I teach psychology in a neighboring district, and the #1 impact that my students have relayed to me is that this pandemic has had on them is depression. And I received countless emails and messages over throughout the spring from my students in particular about when are we going to get back to normal? When can we feel normal? When can we see our friends? And my students who have come back into the classroom this year have relayed exactly those same sentiments to me about depression. They've felt isolated. They've missed their peers, and they've missed the chance to play a sport that they've enjoyed throughout their lives, or the sports that they've enjoyed throughout their lives. Many students rely on the structure and really that feeling of safety that playing a school sport provides. It keeps them grounded, it keeps them focused, it challenges them, it helps keep them fit, it helps them obtain their goals, both competitively and academically. My greatest concern, really, with not allowing our students to play a sport is that students will lose their drive to compete. They'll walk away from a sport that they once loved. They'll fall into unhealthy habits, eating poorly, sleeping at all different times of the day when they really should be active. And I think this really leads them to the risk, as others have mentioned tonight, of contracting an unhealthy lifestyle, which can lead to more disease than the threat that this pandemic really presents to them. I'm just going to close by saying the students, athletes, they want and they need a season. For some, this would be the one normal thing in a world that is so vastly not normal to them at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gall.
Sophia Vadnais. And then Pat McNellis.
Hi, I'm Sophia Vadnais. Like my dad said, I've been playing varsity field hockey since I was in 8th grade, and this year is very big to me, not only because, well, I mean, I'm only a junior, but most of my friends are leaving this year, and I've had them since my first year. They were like the first friends that I knew when I was coming up to the high school, and they made the transition so much easier for me. So I want to be able to be one of those kids for those new girls who are coming up into like this whole weird world that we have now with this whole pandemic. As multiple people have said, this pandemic has impacted everyone's mental health very negatively, and sports is a very positive outlet for kids, and it will definitely impact their mental health in a more positive way, as it hasn't been over the summer and everything else. I've also been practicing 3 times a week over the summer and working out. We've been completely safe. No one has gotten anything. And whenever someone has gone out of state and come back, we've always had a temperature check, and everyone has been completely fine. I mean, there are safe ways to do this.
the state has given us ways to do this and everything else, and I don't see why we can't play when everyone else in Section 6 is. Also, if we keep postponing this and pushing it out longer and bring it into the spring, then we will have more injuries because everyone will be going for multiple sports because they don't want to leave either one. So it's just safer, I think, for us to do it now and keep it safe as we can than rather pushing it and keeping it messy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sophia.
Ms. McNellis?
Good evening. I'll try and be quick and avoid being redundant here. The one thing that I'd like to say more than anything else is that there's a cost to saying no. A lot of folks have talked about what the opportunities that are presented by saying yes, and from my perspective, there's a way to do this in stages. By saying no, we've already lost a few days of practice. Whether or not the kids compete, from my perspective, isn't really that important. It's an opportunity to give them something to do. And in that regard, this is, the first domino in a way. And if you say no, it's going to be that much harder to say yes later. I trust the professionals that we have and the students that we have. We've got an opportunity to do this, and we've got an opportunity to do it safely. Again, focusing on that opportunity cost. There's something to be said for saying yes, even if it's a yes, but there's a way to do this. A lot of folks have already referred back to the experiences that they've had outside of the school environment, and from my perspective, this just goes back to what can we do, and saying no. Saying no, deprives the kids of an opportunity, even if that opportunity is to just run around with their friends from school for an hour and a half. There's value in that. So even if it starts with practice and we move on to competitions later, say yes now and worry about saying no later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNellis.
Mr. Johnson, at this point, that is the end of the people that I have that signed up to speak. So I don't know if there's anybody else that at this point would like to speak.
Okay, having reached the end of our signed-up speakers, as Mr. Day said, is there anyone else in the audience that hasn't spoken that wishes to speak to the board at this point before we move on our agenda? Sir. Can you please give us your name, please?
Good evening. My name is Seth Andrews. I am the JV girls coach and assistant varsity coach. I'm an alumni. I graduated in 1995, along with my fellow coach, David Trito. We are not educators, but we take great pride in being role models for our student athletes. And one of the things that we've told them repeatedly this last season is, you're going to have adversity in life, on the field and off the field. It's up to you how you handle that adversity. You can rise to the occasion, or you can bury your head in the sand. And so we had adversity and we overcame it, and we point to things that are in the hall that have our name, that we say, look, we achieved, you can do it, to give a little credit, to some credence to what we're saying. And now you have that opportunity. I'm asking you, I'm imploring you, use this as a teaching moment. Show our student athletes what is right when we're faced with adversity, not what's easy. I know you'll make the right decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Is there anyone else? Someone coming down? Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I struggle with the lights above me to see.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jasim. I'm one of the captains of the Sweet Home boys soccer team. And the first thing I want to start with is thank you, everyone, to try to keep us safe. And this is the last thing we want is to get the COVID and not to be safe. I just have a few things to say about the soccer team, other sports. We have many seniors this year. a lot of seniors, they all have been planning on going to colleges, continue playing the sport, playing soccer, field hockey, a lot of sport. And not playing this season will literally affect us a lot. You know, we are trying to do everything we can this season for colleges to look at us, give us scholarships, and the only way is for colleges to look at us to just so we can, you know, play this season, and that way we can do a lot, you know. If we do a lot, then we'll get the scholarships. But if we get this season taken away from us, then we cannot do anything. And there's always solution for everything. That's the reason why we're all here. Everyone's stressed out, but there's always a solution for everything. And I think giving us this chance for the season will help us a lot. All the seniors, all the players. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, that'll move us on to the next item on our agenda. And tonight, the next item is the superintendent's report. Mr. Day.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. At this point, I'm going to ask our athletic director, Marissa Doria. You might need to stand at the microphone, Ms. Doria. So last week, we brought some recommendations to the board. We had an extended conversation for about 2 hours. And at the end of that meeting, we were charged with getting some updates from locally, ECIC or the section, and also some conversations that we were working to have to try to gain some consistency so we could better understand and mitigate, you know, be able to offer what we could to mitigate some of the risks that might be inherent. So I would just start by just, you know, for all of the board members, but also everybody in attendance, you know, this is not something, in making recommendations for fall athletics, we recognize, like you, that the sports and school are not separate this year. They are inexorably tied together, and that our primary mission is to fulfill the 4-month plan of trying to get all of our students back into school safely. And that's not something that we took lightly, but what we tried to do is find a way, instead of saying this or that, we tried to find ways to say this and that, and try to find ways to mitigate. I can't say that we could eliminate, but try to mitigate some of the risks involved in order to give kids a chance to have those experiences, but at the same time, maintain a school community environment that would guarantee the safety not just of the students participating, but all the other kids that they would come into contact when they entered school. So that's been our goal all along, and so tonight we'd like to offer you, some updates since last Tuesday night, and then we'd like to revisit some of the recommendations with some modifications we've made based on some of the information we've had. So we'd like to start with Mr. Feldman, girls swimming, and Ms. Doria has had conversations around girls swimming. So Ms. Doria.
Thank you all for having me back in. I know you guys are on a regular basis here, having weekly conversations. I'll be sad when that's over. So just kind of update you with where we are with girls swimming. I know last time we spoke last week, I presented you with 3 options for our girls. The first option would be to swim here on campus only and then have those girls participate in virtual swim meets. The second option I was looking into was seeking participation in the NFL League to begin in the March 1st season. I did hear back that they have accepted us to participate with them in that season if we so choose. And then the third option, if both of those were impossible, I was to pursue mixed competition for our boys and girls to swim together in the winter season. And speaking with our coaches who have spoke with our players, and we've heard from Maya this evening, the families, and if any of you are swim families, I know Ms. Ocasio is, these kids would prefer to swim now and participate in virtual meets and do this on campus and not leave campus to participate in those in-person meets, but be able to do that now. The reason for that would be two-part. The first part is that there's no predicting the future. We've all learned that very quickly through this whole process. So the opportunity to participate now, instead of pushing it off, is attractive to our coaches and our players. And the second reason is, it was alluded to by Maya, Our Shack program has a lot of our swimmers. That's our club program that uses our pool. Unfortunately, that program has not been able to run during this time period. So those swimmers have been without a pool since March. For those of you who are not familiar, that is the worst news you could give a swimmer, is to keep them out of a pool that long. So at this point, it'd be my recommendation, along with the coaches and Mr. Day, that we offer the swim season to occur now, and we would participate in virtual meets. As part of that, ECIC has come together to agree on no spectators on swim meets this season, so that would also be included if we did hold those virtual meets. Yep.
Just got to speak up a little bit.
So the question was, what would a virtual meet entail? So basically what it is, it's running through the same format as a regular meet, but you're collecting those times and then comparing them against your opponent who competes that same day. They might not run at the exact same moment. It's not like a live watch the video, like that type of thing. It's more of you're taking your times afterwards and comparing them to see which time would have been the fastest. That would be our kids swimming in our pool versus, let's say, Clarence swimming in their pool. So we would not be traveling, and we would not be having people come into our building. It's kind of twofold there.
Do we have a problem, the same problem with swimming with officials that you mentioned with some of the other sports?
Swimming officials, no, that was raised with the virtual meets. Would you still require an official? That would be something that we could work out with the other schools. Let's say if a school really wanted to still have officials, you'd have to separate the officials and have one go to one site and one come to the other. It's of my opinion that coaches could do that on the honor system, but if a school felt strongly, I'm sure we could navigate that. Any other questions regarding swimming?
Yeah, Ms. Dory, I'm reading the recommendation part in here, and I don't think you mentioned it, but it does say no spectators allowed, and that's per the guidance we were given.
Correct. So that was an ECIC agreement. Due to the DOH guidelines and indoor facilities, it's really challenging to accommodate all of the swimmers and fans, even if, let's say you had social distancing in place, it would just put you over that cap of 50 people. So the league came together to make that agreement.
Is there one?
I just have to yell a little bit more. So after the school day ends, walk me through. Would the kids start right away, or?
Unfortunately, our swim coaches do not work at Sweet Home, so they wouldn't be able to get here at 1:30, which is when our high school day ends. But they would be able to get here between 3 and 4 p.m. So as I mentioned the last time I spoke last week, we'd be looking to do 2 blocks of practices, one beginning right after the high school day is ending at that 1:35 to 1:45 start time. So students would exit school, begin their practice, and then our second block would begin between 3:30 and 4 p.m. Those students would go home on transportation or take their own transportation, however they came to school, at 1:30, and then return to campus for practice, whether it was at 3:45 or 4 p.m. for swimming.
So that first block of kids who, since the coaches don't get there until a little bit later, who's watching those kids?
Those students would actually be going home and returning to campus.
And then coming back?
Correct.
Okay.
I know that last week I spoke extensively about how USA Swimming has a ton of research about how COVID cannot be passed within chlorine, and I think one or several of the speakers mentioned how the width of the lanes automatically social distance the people within the pool. And so although we all know my stance on sports, and I don't think that it's necessary, but I think last week I was very clear that of all the sports, this is one of the sports that I think is safest to restart, especially with the pool that we have and with virtual meets. With virtual meets, there would be no commingling. The whole cohorting piece of the state guidance would be followed because we wouldn't be mixing with other schools. And so I just want to, be very clear that I do think when you're considering this is a sport that, would be quite safe to start with.
Anything else regarding swimming?
Okay. Before I turn it over to Mr. Day to run through a few other items, I just would like to mention I had the opportunity to speak with Mr. Day and a few of our students on Friday, and to all of our student athletes here tonight. I'm very impressed with your dedication and the way you've stepped up to the plate to advocate for yourself and for your sports in a respectful way. So, you know, in conversations with those students, they really blew me away with the mentality of, you know, Ms. Story, we'll do whatever it takes. And I do believe wholeheartedly that those students could be an ambassador of our program out there, helping us to enforce the guidelines along with our coaches. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Doria. And if you could just be close by.
Yep,
when I
not
don't
going
know
anywhere.
Things and I need help. So one of the other things, in some of the guidance that was out there, that was issued by the New York State Health Department and then the New York State Public High School Athletic Association, some of the areas they seemed conflicting or contradictory at times. And so one of the things that we sought to do was try to gain some understanding consistency amongst certain practices around competition, because we knew that that was an area that was a source of concern for the board. So this morning, Ms. Doria and I were involved in 2 separate meetings that were happening simultaneously. One was broader across the county, and then I also had asked superintendents and athletic directors from districts that we generally play in fall competition to join me in a conversation together about some of the practices and see if we could share what everybody was planning to do, and if we could also come to some understanding or consistent understanding of how we might play some things out. So I was very, very pleased with the results of the meeting that I was in and the willingness of the other districts to make some commitments that I think would help mitigate the risk, which is what we're talking about. So the first piece had to do with symptom screening. And so that means that just like when the kids come into school each day, they're asked to screen for symptoms, and we also ask them to walk by, you know, a thermal camera, which gives us a pretty accurate read on their temperature so that we can eliminate temperature from that area. We know that even here, whether or not we're in competition or not, as many as 60% of the athletes that would be participating would not have been screened that day because they wouldn't have been in school, either through the hybrid model or choosing all remote. So one of the things that we did is that we're committing to screening our kids every day with temperature checks. And the other districts today also said they were doing the same thing. Every single day, practice or game, they're taking temperatures. Each district also committed to screening all players and coaches each day prior to competition, including the taking of temperatures. And they were all willing to sign an attestation to the effect that that had been done. And they were willing to exchange such attestations so that we could have some piece of a record saying that they committed to doing that, to taking part. And I trust our other districts that if they say they were going to do it, that they would. But it's always nice to have in case someone comes back and says, are you sure that that was done? Not every district has the capacity to quickly screen students. We are one of the districts, our thermal scanners are portable, but every district indicated that they were willing to allow their teams to walk in front of the thermal cameras if they're available at a site, just as an extra extra mechanism. So I found that that was I thought that was a good, honest, good faith gesture, because one of the things we know, if we can really minimize kids and whether or not they have symptoms, you cannot guarantee that a student, if they don't exhibit symptoms, doesn't have COVID. We all know that. We know the asymptomatic kids. But if we can symptom screen and districts are willing to do that, I think it mitigates risk. Masking is another piece that was in the guidance. It was kind of unclear. Some of the guidance says that, you know, kids have to wear a mask while they're participating and competing until that they are unable to tolerate the mask. And, you know, in school, there's a medical definition of what that looks like, and in some of the interpretations of that, it was varied. So in having conversations today, each of the districts committed to promoting that kids should wear the mask as much as possible during competition until they just can't do it due to physical strain and the ability to get air. And I think I talked to you last week about my own experiences that early on it's okay, but at times it becomes very difficult. And if you have to eliminate participation, that would be a time when you would then say, I need to take the mask off. And all the districts committed to trying to support that. It was recognized that some students would have notes that would say they would not have masks, but the districts that were at the table. There were 7 districts at the table with us today, and they all, the districts from the Niagara Frontier League, that's the policy that they're following, and it's actually a little bit more stringent, but they all were willing to commit to say that they were going to promote and really expect their kids to wear masks when they were competing. If locally here in practices, we would expect kids to wear masks, until they, for the most part, and use breaks to prevent physical distress as opposed to removing masks. But in a game, you can't do that. So I also felt that there was an agreement that kids and coaches would all wear masks pre and post game and on sidelines, and that everybody would be socially distanced on sidelines. Some of these games, if you know the games, they socially distance themselves by the nature. At certain times, kids come together, but oftentimes space and distance is part of the strategy in that regard. Next, we had conversations about spectators. So here was an area that originally we were saying no spectators, but it appears every district in Erie County is going to allow 2. And they all have, except in swimming, there's no spectators. Every participant would get a lanyard, an official ECIC lanyard, and an official laminated pass, and only people with those passes could come and watch, and then they would have to be masked the entire time on campus, and they would have to be socially distanced, and it would be our responsibility to mark bleachers and places to stand so as to indicate where social distancing would take place. And then in girls swimming, the NFL schools, which in our area, that's the Kenmores, Grand Island, those are the schools that are NFL schools, right? Tonawanda is an ECIC school, right, Ms. Doria? They're moving their girls swim season to March. All the other schools, Amherst, Hamburg, Tonawanda, West Seneca, they all expressed a willingness to work with us and hold remote meets. Starpoint hadn't gotten to that point yet, but they were willing to go have that conversation in their community, and that's really congruent with what our coaches were saying anyways. So the roundtable meeting today really helped me feel as if the other districts were willing, and we were much closer to being on the same page, I thought, of than before that meeting. Ms. McDonald?
When you talk about spectators, are we still planning on, are we allowed to screen spectators before they come?
Well, it's a question of, really, there's so much, here's the reality of it. There's so much else to do in order to make this happen. I'm concerned about Ms. Doria and our ability to screen people as they come through. If we can find a way to quickly and easily do it, we would try to have the thermal cameras, but it's going to be, other than that, it's going to be challenging to do. And we can try that, but it's something I'm willing to give a shot, but that was not something the other districts were willing to commit to. Ms. Battaglia?
So with the spectators and the lanyards and passes. That's okay. Sorry. With the spectators having lanyards and laminated passes, who's monitoring that?
Well, we would have to have people on staff. There would have to be, I call them choke points. You have to limit. There's 2 places really where you can access the back of the campus. We'd have to have people there monitoring and checking the passes and turning people away if they didn't have the passes. Is that fairly consistent with what you're hearing, Ms. Doria?
Yes, and just to be clear, each player will get 2 passes for the season. So those 2 passes that student could choose to give to their guardians, their friends, but those are the only 2 passes that they would receive.
Did you have anything you wanted to add from your meeting that might have been different?
Just to add what Mr. Day was saying, I met with the ECIC, some athletic directors, and had discussions around, sharing, different common shared plans to reopen. The challenges that we run into is everyone's school plan is slightly different. So where we have the thermal scanners, some districts might not have access to that. They might screen students in different ways. So it's difficult when you have a group of about 30 schools to come to set plans for every school that's going to function perfectly for them. So I think kind of marrying my meeting with Mr. Days, we did come out with some good information that makes me feel better about, the safety of our students and our campus here.
So that helps in terms of some of the recommendations that we modified a little bit. So one of the things we talked about last week is we recognize that our kids playing in sports are part of a bigger school community, and our school community is part of a bigger regional community. And what happens in the bigger regional community comes into our school community. Our kids live in the bigger community and come in. And so we recognize, we talked last week about the concept of, being mindful of what's going on within our school community, what's going on in our regional community, and making decisions about whether or not we have our kids go off and participate in activities that could bring that activity towards us. So in trying to craft something that looks like a monitoring plan, you recall in our reopening plan, we had to create a monitoring plan. We had to have metrics to kind of determine how we were doing. And so that in trying to create a monitoring plan for athletics, we tried to pattern it on what we were doing as a district. And so our district plan really says we're looking at how well we do our plan. We look at the number of cases that are actually inside the school, and we also look regionally to see what's going on. So we kind of, we have been taking a look at, first of all, the reopening audit concept, which is an idea that was broached by Mr. Leibel about a month ago. We've actually begun it, and we started with our administrators in the buildings and in the central office to start that process. And one of the things we look for is there are 20 indicators about social distancing, masking, facilities, and how in our operations of our plan for safety. And we have everybody reflect on a scale of 6 to 1, 6 being always, 1 being never. And in the first week of the 20 indicators at the high school, the average comes out to be 4.86 out of 6. With an average score, we had 2 indicators that were always, 11.3 were very consistently, 5 were often, and those were all very positive. And I will say, I can't remember, one of the people said, let's trust the kids. And again, I will tell you, I've been very, very, very pleased with the kids' response. They have really done everything we've asked them to do. Some of the areas where we're getting consistently instead of always have to do with social distancing. When you're passing classes, it's just difficult when you're moving to stay 6 feet apart all the time. But other than that, in classrooms, in lunchrooms, masking, buses, it's been very well done. And so we would always take a look at that, and that's our kind of our current status. In terms of active COVID cases, the metric we were kind of looking for in this case is how many students were in the active isolation protocol for a positive COVID test. And at this time, we don't have any students at the high school in-person instruction in the active isolation metric. We have had a case that reported itself before school even started, but that person has exited the isolation and they've returned to the campus. So this is what we don't have any active at this point. And then the regional data, we were really looking at that positive test rate being the one that is used most often regionally. And right now, today's average in the region is 1.3%. So, Ms. Dory and I have spent a lot of time kind of figuring out how to really work this. And so the idea is that before beginning, and I will be honest, part of our plan from the beginning was to front load training with staff so that we could get off on a good start, and that delayed student access to campus. So as of today, students have only been on campus at the high school for 6 days. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to be sure after 4 months of work that we had at least 2 months of, 2 weeks where kids were on campus to make sure our plan was working well, that we didn't have a high transmission rate, and that regionally things hadn't changed. So we believe that to begin athletics, we'd like to really have our audit in a good place where we don't have anything less than often, so we wouldn't have never, seldom, or sometimes. And right now we're at that spot. That we wouldn't have any kids in active isolation. We don't have that at this point. And that the regional positive test rate wouldn't be any higher than 2%. Right now it's at 1.3%. I think it would be very difficult to get to 2% when the 7-day rolling average by the end of this week. But we figure if those things were in place, we'd be comfortable starting. And then what we would ask to do is every week, we would monitor those same indicators to make sure that we were ready at the end of every Friday to take the next step, which would be competition, or in the case of moderate sports, moving from the introductory kind of work that you do at the beginning of season to the more competitive practices where you're scrimmaging, doing small sets, things of that nature. And so we really look to see how that would be going. And what we do is none of them, in our opening plan, none of these metrics is an automatic, we go to remote. And what we were asking here in this plan is nothing is an automatic. What it automatically triggers is a conversation amongst key stakeholders. And that would be the superintendent, the board president, the athletic director, the high school principal, the representative from the Teachers Association and the Service Employees Association and the PTA. That we would consult, if one of those things were triggered, we would include those people in a conversation about whether to take the next step. Because there could be mitigated, you could get two if they came from the same family, and you'd be wondering if that was a fair use of the two. So you'd want to have that conversation using the metrics as the basis, but not as an automatic menu out. So we've worked pretty hard on trying to craft a plan that seems, that we hope makes some sense. You know, in September 25th, this Friday, we would take that end of 2-week piece, and if we're in a good place, which I think we would be at this point, we'd be ready to go with athletics. And, you know, I'd be willing to say at the end of the 2 weeks, I'd be willing to let practices start the next day on Saturday, because we've had our 2 full weeks of schooling. Then the next week, October 2nd, we would check the status again, and then that would be when moderate risk sports would start to really do the higher level practicing, which would be much closer contact, scrimmaging, small team competitive drills. And then October 9th is when, that's I think the earliest that our moderate risk sports could begin team competition. So this plan is basically designed, we have metrics, they're clear, they have the 3 pieces, they involve the breadth of the school community. None is an automatic out, but it is a way to kind of track as we go through, so we're watching what's going on and we're thoughtful about it. Any questions or thoughts on that piece? If not, then what we'd like to do is revisit some of our recommendations and then turn it over for you for conversation. Last week, we had, in recommendation number 1, we had gymnastics and girls swimming as, for various reasons, not running them. You'll see that we've taken girls swimming out of that recommendation. Gymnastics is a little in a different place right now. This fall, some are health related and some are logistical. Some of the logistical pieces are every school really needs the space where we would normally set up gymnastics as teaching stations in order to have the distancing that 12 feet of space requires. And so there's really, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Doria, there's no district that's really willing to host a gymnastics event because of the space issues.
That's correct. So communities would be hosted at a local gymnastics facility, such as
Turner's, Western New York Gymnastics. So because the schools can't effectively set up a whole setup, like maybe they can just set up a vault or bars, they can't host those things in their building. So if we were to participate, our students would have to go to these private gyms to have their contests.
And also when we practice. We might be able to set up a small practice area, but if you wanted a full practice, they would have to travel. And we're somewhat concerned about having to rely on a private facility to host our kids. I know it's being done in some places, you know, and you've heard Epic Center and things, but when it comes to the kids, it's just a struggle for gymnastics.
So every school in the region is a no on gymnastics?
No, they'd be participating, but they're just not able to host those things in their own facilities. So not every school offers gymnastics. So for example, West Seneca does not offer gymnastics. So it's a federated sport, so it's really at the sectional level. The conversation with gymnastics was really ongoing even till over the weekend with which schools could host, which schools could have even practice facilities. So a school like Clarence is having their students practice every day off-site, and then their meets are off-site as well. So, you know, if we were to go that route, we'd have to have a conversation about seeking a venue out for practice, providing transportation for our students if necessary, and then all of those things being held off campus. Just in light of our conversations that we've been having as a group the past couple weeks, it didn't seem to me that that fell in line with the safety concerns that you all were sharing with me in terms of, you know, not allowing our swimmers to go participate in another venue, but we'd be sending our gymnasts to go participate in an indoor outside venue.
So recommendation number 2 from last week remains the same, and that was to allow low-risk sports to begin. And I would honestly modify it from what you see on the screen. If we can finish this full week, I would be willing to let, I would recommend that they start on Saturday the 26th, so they can get a couple more practices in, which allows them to, you can hear some of the concerns about game time. The goal was to have 2 weeks of the season in, so I would recommend letting them start on the 26th of September. And this is golf, boys and girls cross country, and girls tennis. And we discussed a lot of that last week. So really, that recommendation remains the same.
I noticed it says most districts indicated they're willing to allow their teams. Most districts, no. It says most districts indicated they're willing to allow their teams to walk in front.
We didn't have every district at the table in my conversation, so I
Okay.
can't guarantee that every district would be
Okay.
willing to do that. So I believe many would, but I can't tell you that everyone would. I can't commit to that.
What were the districts that you were sitting down with?
I sat down with Grand Island, Kenmore, Tonawanda, Grand Island, Tonawanda, West Seneca,
I think Amherst.
Amherst. Sorry, a little senior
I know
moment
Williamsville
here.
was trying to get in, but I don't know if you ever made it.
Williamsville tried to get in, but I organized the meeting, and then the network went down, and I got kicked out of my own meeting. So I did send these to Williamsville and ask them to ask Dr. Muccia from Williamsville to contact me. He's the district athletic director, to talk to me about some of these and see if they would be willing to, because those are the sports that we play the most. But in terms of some of the federated sports, that could include schools beyond what we normally think of as our ECIC division. Is that accurate?
Correct. And ECIC, in the meeting that we had today, did agree to screen all athletes before sending them to other campuses, but that screening may or may not look exactly like our screening that we do here on campus.
So then what I call recommendation 3A, again, revisits our recommendation to allow the moderate risk sports. And I feel and I hope you know that I wouldn't make a recommendation if I didn't feel that we could do it and do it safely. And I can't tell you I can guarantee that I can eliminate risk, but I can't say I can eliminate risk in having school every day. So I believe we can do this. I feel better because of the other districts' willingness to help to work together and collaborate. And I also feel I was really, and Ms. Doria mentioned it, but when we had a conversation with 5 students representing soccer, I believe, right? But their eloquence, and I believe representative of the spirit of our kids, they were willing to do whatever it would take. And they said, you want us to wear a mask? We'll wear a mask in the games, even if we're the only district. We'll do all of these things. And, and I really feel that spirit, and I've been so impressed with the kids that after 6 days, I really feel that, when I said, if we're going to do this, we have to be the very best district at running our athletic plan, not just our school plan. And every one of the kids, and there are only 5, and they weren't representative of the 100, but I believe they are. And they said that they would be willing to do it. And I do believe that we now have a clear means and process to help monitor our school reopening effectiveness. So, we are recommending boys and girls soccer, field hockey, and I'm putting girls tennis doubles on there because of the commitment of the districts to mask until physically unable, that I believe that would help address some of the concerns that you might have expressed last week around girls tennis.
Mr. Day, I just want to make a note that despite what you might have seen on some local media today, that soccer is considered a moderate risk, not a low risk. I saw at least 2 different media sources today listed as a low risk.
Then in terms of recommendation 3B is for girls swimming. So last week we had girls swimming on the list because we believed swimming was going to move. But now that it has not moved, we're recommending that girls be given a chance, if moderate risk sports are going to start, that they be given a chance, that we can allow practices and the virtual meets. We would recommend, we'd recommend that the kids come to practice ready for practice, but we don't want to send kids out in wet suits. And we would have the same regulated locker room setup where kids could go in, you know, 2 or 3 at a time, and whatever Ms. Doria and the coaches work out is socially distanced, and I would trust that, so the kids could get changed. I don't want kids going off wet and going outside. We wouldn't have the supervision issues because of the later start. Kids with the only sports that can start immediately, you got to be able to start after school, and if you can't go after school, you got to get back. And rides and transportation will be a unique issue that we don't normally have, because so many kids are going to have to get a ride every day in order to go. We believe that given the numbers that we anticipate for swimming, we can have the whole team in at a time. However, other districts and even some of the correspondence that we received recommended the idea of cohorted practices if our numbers were big enough that we could break practices into 2 smaller pieces so you could have smaller numbers of kids practicing indoors at the same time. But right now, I believe our numbers would allow us to have 1 practice. Is that what we think, Ms. Doria?
Yeah, it's a little unpredictable with just running the sign-outs. I don't know exactly how many of those students will actually try out for each team. But we do have 8 lanes in our pool, and if we had 2 swimmers in each lane, that could give us a participation number of 16. And if we went beyond that, we could run a separate session for the next set of, let's say, up to 16 individuals. I'll also note that our assistant swim coach, Vince McCarthy, oversees the ECC pool. So he has reopened that pool and is very familiar with the guidelines and all the things that he's encountered reopening that pool. I know he can bring to us here and help us make a little bit smoother transition than maybe a district that doesn't have that advantage.
And the last recommendation is one that, you know, I know Ms. Doria may not agree with me totally on, but it's my recommendation just at this juncture that we not offer modified sports, not in the all season, but the fall season. And it's not really about being against activity for our middle school students, but just, you know, it's really my belief that I want to make sure that before we expand the notion that we're able to do varsity and junior varsity well. And so I would not, we are concerned about the middle school kids being able to get rides and their ability to make practices because they are wholly dependent on parents for rides. And it would not certainly rule out modified sports for the whole year, but the recommendation comes just as a way to really scaffold our reopening of athletics so that we can really hone in on our high school students, our seniors playing varsity sports to make sure we can do that well, rather than trying to take on too much in multiple locations. So at that juncture, this is kind of where we've stood, and that's all the information. We will answer any questions or, you know, engage the conversation however you'd like to do it.
Okay, I'm going to start off real quick. I want to just thank you, Mr. Day and Ms. Doria, for spending the time doing some of the stuff that we tasked you with, and when I know this wasn't the only thing on your agendas right now. I'm going to refer back again, and we've had this discussion a couple times, and I know, Ms. Doria, you've tried to chase it up the line that the New York State Public High School Athletic Association was trying to tell us we couldn't do screening on our athletes as they come into the other ones. And the fact that you were able to get the local schools to all come to that agreement that we would do that, to me, makes a big difference. It was mind-boggling to me that they wouldn't allow that, especially when you consider the number of kids who are, you know, they might only be in school 2 days a week, or in some school districts, not at all, so they're not being screened. To bring them into an athletic event without screening just made, that's what I talked about at the beginning, about poking holes in our plan. So despite the fact that they said we can't do it, I'm glad to see that you and the other schools have agreed to doing that. It just makes sense to me. I don't understand why it was ever even a question, to tell you the truth. But with that,
I'll just very honestly state that I cannot guarantee that there won't be some districts that would have not disagreed with us. And then we'd have to make a decision about whether or not we can compete against them. But I would try to engage them in conversation to find common ground rather than just not play.
I'll open up to the rest of the board at this point before we get to the motions.
I have 2 comments or questions, I guess. Today on my lunch at work, I spent the hour reviewing the revised New York State recommendation for fall sports. Have we considered or said that our coaches will be participating in the National Federation of State High School Associations COVID training?
Yes, that was in both of RIDE recommendations on the previous 2 weeks. I've set up a meeting already for tomorrow night with the low-risk coaches, as from directions from you guys from last week, that those were going to begin next Monday. And that's part of our training that myself and our athletic trainer, our coaches will all do that in our meeting. I've taken it myself. Well, it's not the best thing. It is very good, and it does help create a standard for all of our coaches that we have a standard knowledge. In addition to that, I'll be creating something similar for our student athletes on ThinkTech, where they complete it. Sometimes I find I look through the student's lens, and when there's a document that's 10, 15 pages long, I don't think that's really a great opportunity for those kids to read through that on their own, kind of pin it down, put it in that ThinkTech application, and then make it a little bit more accessible for our students.
Great. The other thing I did notice in the recommendation was that we could communicate to our competitors or our other districts what is required when they come on our campus. Would that be something that you, Ms. Doria, take care of, or is that something that Mr. Day would do?
I started to draft that, and I shared it with Mr. Day and Mrs. Bayless as well, to kind of look over and make sure that we're all in alignment with the things we're discussing here. And then I'd share that out with ECIC, in addition to any other schools that we would be playing if they were outside non-league competitions.
Thank you. And again, thank you for everything you've done. This has been enlightening.
First of all, I just want to thank all the parents and the students here, and I also want to mention and make note of all the emails. I know it's already been said, but I will say for myself, and I think I speak on behalf of the board here, is that those are heartfelt. We hear them, we listen to them, we read them, and you know, they are impactful, and I do believe that they make a difference. So I just really want to say I appreciate everybody for everything they've written, and you know, it's hasn't fallen on deaf ears. The one thing I'm wondering about is the rate, and this is more of a comment, I guess, to the board members, because I know there's discussion on risk in that, and I guess my view is we're at 1.3. Like, at what point, if we're not comfortable at 1.3, you know, we're never going to zero. It's going to take a long time to go to zero. So, you know, my thought is at 1.3, that's a pretty low rate. And, you know, as there's risk in everything. There's risk in allowing our kids to drive a car or go on the bus or even come to school. And so, you know, that's kind of the position I'm at. My own son plays soccer, so I feel like I'd be hypocritical if I didn't vote in favor or to support the plan that's been outlined here. And you know, I was reading a quote today, and it said, this was by Mike Singletary. It said, "The best part of sports is the opportunity to play." And you know, so I think everybody's made a really great point here, and so I think you know, all the statements made, I'm in favor of moving forward with the plans that have been outlined. But I also want to say that you know, I don't take that lightly, and that that there is risk here, and there's a tremendous amount of discussion and thought that's gone into this. And the biggest reason that I'm in favor of this is because of my confidence in Mr. Day and our athletic director. So far, the opening has gone really well. I think the best that I've seen in any of the other districts. And there's no reason for me to doubt you at this point in time. So, you know, I wanted to mention that, and so I'm in favor of moving forward.
So I feel very compelled to speak because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding of my position that is out in the community. And it starts with the fact that many people are saying that I dislike sports, which it couldn't be further from the truth. My, you know, my argument against sports right now, actually, you know, I want to commend all of the athletes and parents who are here to speak for their sport. This is the way that it's supposed to work. And you all have presented compelling arguments. My argument in my discussion at every single one of our board meetings has nothing to do with a particular sport. It has, although, I presented instances in specific sports, it has to do with the governor and NISFA. Their guidelines are contrary to everything that was put out by the state and the health department. The state and the health department put this district, 153 people, with a ton of work and hours to put together a plan to bring your children back or you back hybrid. This isn't normal. This isn't what we know school to be. And so I can't look away from the work of all those people because NISFA was careless in their guidelines. If they had presented us with guidelines that I could get on board that wasn't completely against what the health department and the state gave us as guidelines for physical education in schools as well as putting kids in seats, then perhaps I could get on board more. It has nothing to do with Sweet Home. I believe in the Sweet Home way. I believe in our coaches. I believe in our athletes. What I don't know is what happens when others from other districts come. We've all seen the issues that other districts have in coming up with a safe plan to have their kids in schools. I can't trust that their carelessness won't come back and affect our children. And so that is why I cannot vote for athletics. That is why I voted to not add the addendum to the agenda tonight. It is not because I do not want to come off as disliking our athletes or disliking our coaches, because nothing could be further from the truth. When I look at, some of the arguments that you all made, one of the arguments, that we talked about is how we'll do whatever it takes. I look at an article in the Buffalo News this week, and Dr. Thomas Russo, who's the chief of Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Buffalo at the Jacobs School of Medicine and Biomedical Sciences, and he talks about the risk of just having lunch at schools and mask breaks at schools. Had NISFA allowed us the time to be able to see how putting our kids back in schools, what the reaction was, I'd be much more apt to be able to vote and say, and give a go-ahead to sports. Unfortunately, NISFA decided to move away from their original plan, and along with the governor, very quickly decided to say that sports had to start by the end of September, which put all districts and regions in a very precarious position. And so here we sit tonight with a very large decision. Trust me, I've been sent a ton of emails that have said how much I dislike sports. I want to be very clear. Both of my children have been athletes. I don't dislike sports. I've been asked, where's my research? My research lies with a 28-year-old girl who was a UB graduate from medical school who's now dead from COVID because she worked in a hospital. My research lies in the 21-year-old from North Tonawanda who is perfectly healthy and is now dead from COVID. That's where my research lies. I'm not willing to take that risk for children. I know we all have differences of opinions, and again, as I stated, you all make compelling arguments. I hope you can understand my position, but please know it has nothing to do with athletics. It has everything to do with the guidance and the governor making decision and putting districts and regions into incredibly difficult positions. I also want to just say, I've had conversations with both Mr. Day and Ms. Doria, and you know how much I appreciate your hard work, how much I respect both of you and believe in both of you, but I go back to the guidance and the governor.
Thank you, Ms. Ocasio. It was very well said. I'll start off by saying, first and foremost, I expressed it on the floor last week. I supported the plan as written last week, and I intend to do so as amended this week. I do think it's a solid plan. It doesn't come without reservation, though. As Mrs. Ocasio alluded to, there's vectors of infection potentially that are outside of our control, outside of the district's administrative control, and that comes from interscholastic sports. We're inviting districts in who we have no control over how they're administering the return to school program. So it is not without risk. I know that the risk of those in this room is very well informed, and I know that the student athlete's voice is very well represented here tonight, but you have to understand there is another 80 or 85% of the student body that isn't a student athlete. And by voting yes tonight, it's with a bit of a heavy heart. I know that I'm introducing another layer of risk into those students' lives that wasn't there before, and for no benefit to them. So you have to understand that the board is doing our best to try and consider the fact that there are many voices and many interests outside of just that of the student athlete. I still stand by the fact that I will vote in support of appointing the coaches tonight as part of the agenda. I want to highlight three things. First of all, that vote will be a vote of confidence for our administration, for our coaches, and for our student athletes. I think what has happened over the last 2 weeks in the district is emblematic of an excellent plan. I think the voices of the student athlete leaders here tonight goes a long way to know. I know the weight that a captain's voice carries, and to hear the captains coming forward and saying they're going to do anything they can to keep safe, and I know Ms. Doria and Mr. Day and the rest of the coaches will do the same. It's a vote of confidence in the administration, the coaches, and the athletes. The second point I wanted to bring up is equity. Ms. Doria talked about that a little bit at the board meeting last week, and Mr. McGowan very tactfully called me out on some of the comments I had made last week, which I've come to regret, and that has to do with the fact that I had mentioned that a lot of the recruiting at the high levels comes out of the premier programs. It really isn't out of the varsity athletics. That said, that was deaf to the fact that there is an issue of equity here, is that club athletics, premier groups, premier organizations aren't accessible to everyone. And by saying that, I realized that and by excluding school sports from the conversation, it eliminates that opportunity. And the third point is somewhat related, is that to vote a no, in my mind, is kind of deaf to the fact that a vast majority of our students, our student athletes, are playing sports outside of the school. Those vectors that I talked about are already there. By having them in the school, they're there. And it's hard to really just distinguish and say, well, it's only going to happen through, and honestly, I'm a coach. I actually have coached for Sweet Home Club, and my son is a travel soccer athlete, so I can't in good faith vote anything but yes, knowing that I'm part of that introduction of those vectors. My son is playing travel soccer, and he will be in school tomorrow and the next Monday and Tuesday after that. So it is, like I said, I want to make sure that you recognize that the board's in its deliberation and maybe its delay was trying to weigh those risk factors. And when we talk about moderate risks, as Mrs. Ocasio said, and I think some of the other board members will say, that risk isn't just of injury, of illness. It is potential for a mortal disease. But I do intend to vote yes, and I appreciate your time tonight.
I just want to, sorry. I want to start by saying kudos to our student athletes who mobilized and organized to have their voices heard. I was just recently elected in July, and I ran on a platform of the importance of young and youth voices in our local decision-making processes. I am so humbled and impressed by the dedication and passion of our student community. And I want you all to know that we as a board, and myself in particular, I can only speak for myself, we have the utmost respect for you, not only as students, not only as athletes, especially as athletes, knowing the lengths that you're willing to go to make this happen, but also as citizens engaging in local politics. Civic responsibility is so important these days, especially with COVID. And again, it's just really humbling and inspiring to see you speak up for what you're passionate about. My decision-making process was similar to Ms. Ocasio's in that this is not really a decision about sports for me. I was the captain of the Sweet Home varsity field hockey team when I was a senior here. Sports was hugely informative of the relationships that I made in high school and the friendships that I had. The things that I'm struggling with is that we are being asked to trust tens of thousands of other people, not just the other districts and the other athletic programs, but all of the students in their schools, all of their families. We know that the best way that we can cut down on this virus is by social distancing, by cohorting, by mask wearing, and we can't do any of those three things in the middle of a match. We just can't do it. And those are the only 3 tried and true methods that we have available to us right now. So when I'm thinking about one of the things that people said in a lot of the emails that we got was, why can't we just give it a try? If it fails, and we can go back to not having sports. But my answer to that is, what happens if we try and we fail? What does that mean? Well, that means that somebody in our community has gotten sick. Potentially a whole team has gotten sick of our students. And this is kind of worst case scenario, but it's also not necessarily unlikely. We know how quickly this virus can spread. We know how contagious it is. So when we are putting people on a field without masks, without a guarantee of social distancing, and they're also doing rigorous physical activity, it doesn't take a full hour in someone's presence unmasked. It can be in just a second. If you're unlucky, if someone is asymptomatic and we just don't know. So that's my main concern. And drawing from that, I'm really worried that this puts our reopening plan in jeopardy. As other people have said, we've spent months and hundreds of hours. Poor Mr. Day has probably spent thousands of hours putting together this reopening plan, and it is an excellent plan that I have the utmost faith in. But it's also a very precariously balanced plan. It's based on the assumption that every single person in our district is doing every single thing that they can do to keep each other safe. And we've built in room in that plan for mistakes and for, wiggle room to catch us just in case. But it's still very, very tenuous. And I'm worried that by adding sports unmasked and without social distancing on top of this tenuous balance, we're threatening, this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And what does it mean if we have to go remote again? Because that's a much larger discussion about the impacts that has on our Sweet Home community. Sorry, I have a bunch of notes here. I just want to emphasize that we are incredibly privileged to be in the circumstances that we are in at Sweet Home right now. Our district has been stewarded by our leadership team and the strength of our community to ensure that we are physically, financially, and emotionally ready to open, because it wasn't a given. It was something that so much had to come together in just the right way for this plan to work. And I'm worried that if a single thing shifts out of place, we're going to have to go fully remote again, and we can't say how long that will last. I mean, obviously, we're in a much better place now than we were in the spring. We know more, we have a plan in place, and I do believe that we will be able to kind of recover from that. But as, I don't know who said it earlier, I think it was Ms. Daria, but we cannot predict the future. So I think I'm just really concerned about the greater implications that these risks could have on our entire Sweet Home community.
I sit and listen to my colleagues, and every single one of them makes valid points. Sorry, Nadine. All of my colleagues have made very, very good points, as well as all of the students and parents in the audience. I have not taken this decision lightly. I don't think any of us have. I have a senior athlete. She's at home. Her and I have had many conversations about this, many conversations about this. And as she's not going to go on to college and play her sport in college, her views to me mean a little bit more, because she's a little bit more of an academic, in that for her it is more important to have as much of her senior year as she possibly can in yes, she wants to play her sport, and yes, if it's safe, she wants to go, but if it means going back fully remote and back to that level of, as many have said, that depression that comes with not being able to leave your home, she's not willing to chance it. That being said, like Mr. Leibel said, at what level are we about to, can we say, okay, we have a good plan, we're in a good place in the community, we could probably start this and be okay. So I am cautiously voting yes and hoping that my faith and trust in not only the student athletes and their coaches and our administration, but also in the board, that we can keep our community safe. But please know that this has weighed heavy on all of us for many, many days, many, many weeks. I mean, I don't know that any of us has really got a full night's sleep since March. But athletics it's an additional piece, and like we've said, the 100 and whatever athletes that play sports in the fall do put the rest of our students at risk, and I have concerns for that, but I trust that we've got a good plan.
Okay, I'm going to thank all my fellow board members for their thoughts here today. You want to speak? I'm sorry, did we miss you? Go. No, go right ahead. I always speak last.
Hello. I'd like to start off by saying I did get a few messages on my answering machine, and I did not return the calls because they were all jumbled on my answering machine, so it wasn't for lack of wanting to talk to you. When Mr. Day started the school year, he proposed this to teachers, that what is our end game? What are we striving for here? The answer was safety of our kids, getting our kids back to school safely, which really is our priority right now. I, in good conscience, do not feel adding another layer on is going to help achieve that goal. I work in a hospital 10 hours a day. I am face-to-face with COVID. I have seen its destruction, and I am just not willing to put our kids at that risk. I don't want to go back to fully remote. I think that has some detriment to it, too. I will say I know a couple of my board members mentioned confidence in Mr. Day and the administration. This has nothing to do with my confidence in you or administration, or you, or the coaches. I am completely confident in you. What it does have to do with is the fact that I don't want to see our kids suffering. I know parents are gung-ho to get their kids back to sports. I would be too. But I've got 3,200 kids I need to think about, not just our number of kids doing sports. Your passionate pleas have not gone upon deaf ears. We've heard it. A lot of us were waiting to decide till after we heard what you had to say. What else did I want to say here? I just don't want to see all our hours and months of work that we've gone into taking care of our kids go down the drain. I know somebody had mentioned our COVID rate was 1.3. Well, if you look back on Thursday and Friday, it was 1.2. So it's inching up a little bit. At this point, I am not willing to put our 3,200 kids at risk. So I will be voting no on the moderate sports.
Thank you, Mr. Jason. Again, I want to thank all my fellow board members for the thoughtful deliberations and comments on this, and for the people who are here tonight for sharing your feelings. As Mrs. Battaglia mentioned, I doubt most of us have slept much. I know Mr. Day hasn't. He's working, I can't even tell you how many days in a row he's probably worked, or months for that matter at this point. In my mind, starting in May, as we put our reopening plan together, we spent literally hundreds of hours, not to mention the money involved behind it, to make sure that we could have the safest plan. And I believe that we have the safest plan in Western New York, and the best plan, just by the fact that we've got so many kids in school. And that's why I think our board challenged our administrators to make sure that if we could move forward in athletics, we'd be in the same position, that we could have the safest plan we possibly could to move forward in athletics. And I believe they've done that. I get there are still inherent dangers no matter what. But as Mr. Leibel said, we are at a a low point right now, and if, you know, if we wait for zero, we'll never get there. So you heard my opinion, you've heard everybody's thoughts, and at this point, we're going to move forward on our agenda. I'm assuming you're finished with the superintendent's report. I'm sorry, Mr. Day. Thank you. Okay, so our next item on our agenda is our personnel items. Typically, if you've ever seen or been to one of our board meetings in the past, we vote on a basis where we do everything all at once. We're not going to do that tonight. I would ask for a motion for the first item under teaching and administrative, item C1, which is for the low-risk sports. Okay, is there a second on that motion? We have a motion and a second. Item C1 is to, now we don't do all the individual pieces. We appoint the coaches to handle those sports. So item C1 is specifically to appoint the Ms. Ava Basehart for boys cross country, Christine Casper for girls cross country, Mike Tojek for boys golf. These are all varsity sports, and we still need to get a coach for girls tennis, which is the singles, which we're hoping to have Friday for our meeting at that point. That is singles tennis, correct? Well, actually, the coach would be for either, but yeah, I'm sorry.
Appoint a coach for tennis?
Yeah.
Right. Because that's all we can do.
Yeah.
I'd just like to add, we do have a few girls participating this year on our golf team, so I'm pretty pumped about that, so it would be just golf.
Cool.
Just, thank you.
Okay. Before we vote, any last comments on these individual items?
My vote in no way reflects my confidence in the coaches or the athletes.
Anyone else?
I would just, for clarity, the vote on the coaches is a vote to move forward with the plan.
Yeah. Yeah, for those of you who follow this, we have to approve the coaches for any of the rest of this to move forward. As the plan that Mr. Daper and Mrs. Doria worked on presenting tonight, plus the paper they've given us has some more details behind that. As a school board, we approve the big picture, and then it's up to the administrators to handle the details beyond that. So that's how each of these individual votes will be. It'll be specifically for the coaches, but that allows them to move forward with the rest of the plan.
And just to note that all the materials the board members are referencing, you can find them on the website if you want to see them.
Anything else? Okay, we have the motion and a second to approve those three coaches for the low-risk sports. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And opposed or abstain? You're opposing. Okay, so that motion passes 6-1. With that, I would look for a motion for item C2 for the coaches for the medium-risk sports. I have a motion. Is there a second? There's a second by Mr. Liable. So for the medium risk sports, this is a motion to approve Dawn Crowder-Cromer for field hockey, Kelly Hoke, that's varsity, Kelly Hoke for JV field hockey, Ryan McCaffrey for varsity soccer, Prisco Hundano for JV soccer, these are both boys, I'm sorry, David Trito for varsity girls soccer, and Seth Andrews for JV girls soccer. Those are those coaches into that item. Any discussion on that motion?
My vote tonight in no way is about my confidence in the athletes or the coaches.
Other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second to appoint those 6 coaches. All in favor, please signify by aye. That's 4. Opposed? 4-3. Okay, that motion carries by a 4-3 count. The third item for tonight is item C3. It is for the coaching for swimming. Can I get a motion on that one? Is there a second? We have a motion and a second for coaches for girls swim. It's Dan McCarthy and Vince McCarthy. This is both listed as varsity swim. And this is, the plan that they will be doing. Go ahead, Mr. Doria.
The students would come in person for practice here in our pool, and the meets would be conducted virtually, so there would be no students from other schools coming here, and our students would not be traveling to other schools.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Because cohorting would be followed, meaning from the state guidance, there would be no other teams that would be coming into our pool, because there would be no spectators. My vote, I just wanted to explain my vote here. And because I know of the safety guidelines of the distancing in the pool, and I know, and that the fact that the whole idea of swimming is that you don't breathe, so.
50 yards, one breath, go. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll go to the vote then. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye? Opposed? And that motion carries 7-0. That brings us to the end of our personnel agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see, the next item on our agenda, sorry, I got to get back in place here, is the second open session. As per Board Policy 1512, we hold 2 open sessions at each meeting. Second session may be used to address the board on topics appropriate for open session. Board welcomes attendance and participation by district residents, persons having business within the boundaries of the school district, and persons who do business with the Board of Education. Again, speakers must be at least 16 years of age and be limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I see a hand. Please step up to the mic and give us your name, please.
Just very quickly, I think that, oh, sorry. I know I did this, but then I messed everybody else up after, because I think it was mine that stayed high before. I really appreciate for everybody what we're trying to do here and give the kids a chance and give the parents a chance to let their kids continue this. The one comment I just want to make that I listened to everything you guys were saying and very much in agreement. The one thing that I wanted to, I think there's a lot of assumptions being made, and the only thing I want to say is the one thing about our student athletes, if they're not in a program and they're not in some type of setting where they're going to be, lack of a better word, controlled or in a monotonous program, like somebody said, where else are they going to be? There could be more risk of them contracting something being that they're somewhere else, instead of in the fact that they're in our controlled society, in our controlled area that's safe. So my opinion is the assumptions that were made, I think are that. They're emotional, right? And that's fine. I'm emotional too, you can probably tell. So I've done a lot of reading too, and the Buffalo News I struggle with because there's certain aspects of that too. But the assumption that our kids are more apt in elsewhere rather than our controlled environment, I think is probably more of a risk than it is when we give them the opportunity to be together in our environment. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else? I'm trying to see below the lights. Sir.
I just want to say thank you very much for giving us the time and listen to us and take out what we have to say into her and give us the best answer. We definitely appreciate you guys taking your time and giving these student athletes another chance, okay, of life, not just for the school, but it's a chance for life for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I would look for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for attending.